My name is Sarah and it's my pleasure to be here tonight and to speak with Shankari Chandran. I too would like to acknowledge that it always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and tonight we're very blessed to be on this beautiful Gadigal country. Thank you so much, Hanny, for that warm introduction and for sharing your wonderful talents with us. For those of you that are new to RACS, we are an independent non-profit providing legal services and advocacy for refugees, people seeking asylum, the stateless and displaced, since 1987. And tonight we are so lucky to be surrounded by these sharp, creative and passionate women for tonight's event. Shankari, as well as writing about dispossession and the creation of community and working in the social justice sector, you are a child of refugees. So with all of this, there's quite a lot of alignment between you and RACS. Shankari is our brand new Neighbourhood ambassador. Yay. The Neighbourhood is RAC's community of monthly givers, making it possible for us to continue delivering the critical legal services that refugees need when they need it most. Tonight we'll talk a little bit about Shankari's connection with refugees, her writing of course, her legal background and her commitment to justice. But we should also have some time at the end for some Q&A, so please get those questions ready. I want to make sure that I give a very big thank you to Belvoir St Theatre for lending their amazing space to us for this event. It really is so amazing to have your kind generosity supporting us. And to Rosie Ravelstein Books, who are selling their books tonight and donating 50% of the profits to RACS. We're really grateful to be partnering with them ongoing. Now, some of the topics that we're going to discuss tonight are really heavy topics. I myself, I've admitted a number of times how moved and how affected I've been reading these books, given my years of work, and I'm not the person that has experienced the detention or the seeking of asylum. So if this is bringing up anything for you or you're struggling with any of the topics tonight and do need help, please reach out. There are a number of us here from the RACS team and we would very much like to help you make sure that you're in contact with any supports you might need if this is raising any issues for you. Now to the star of tonight. Shankari. We are stoked to have you as our newest Neighbourhood ambassador. And as someone who comes with a range of perspectives, who has contributed a range of perspectives to our narrative, can you tell us about your connection with refugee rights in your life and in your writing?
Yeah, thank you. So, can you hear me? Excellent, thank you. It's amazing what you've got to do to get onto the stage at Belvoir Street. Thank you for having me, Sarah, and I kept trying to tell her she's made a terrible mistake by inviting me to be an ambassador, but I will do my best for you and the organisation because I do admire you so very much. My connection to refugee rights is less about connection to refugee rights and more about really being acutely aware throughout my own life of the privilege that we had as growing up in Australia because our parents made choices that were closed off to the rest of our people, our ethnic group, the Sri Lankan Tamil people, at a certain point in time, because at a certain point in time they had no choice but to stay, and then they had no choice but to survive if they could. And eventually they had no choice but to flee. And so in our case, we were a generation where we grew up hearing the stories of our parents moving between Colombo and Jaffna, depending on where the ethnic violence was. stories of my father. Some of you know my father, and he's sort of the most gentle person you can imagine. But as a child, he tells stories of creating projectile weapons out of bottles of soda, filling it with sand and rocks, and discussions amongst his 7 siblings of what would be the most effective way to protect themselves. We then, sort of fast forward, we move to this life in Australia that our family has given us. And we see the outbreak of war, where in 1 week, 3,000 Sri Lankan Tamils were set on fire and killed, which precipitated a civil war that went for almost 30 years and culminated in almost 100,000 people dying, being crushed between the ocean, a jungle, a militant group that purported to defend them, and a Sri Lankan army and government that they were supposed to be the citizens of that country. So, we watched that unfold, and we were always aware of the life that we could have had but didn't have, and the life that we were given as a result of the choices that they made. And then the question became throughout our childhood, how will you use that privilege? How will you use the safety, the security, the education, the training that you have been given? And because we have been given it, because our children have been given it, and hopefully their children will be given it. And so for me, it's been a lifelong attempted practice. And I say attempted practice because, on any given day, I'm impossible to deal with, and occasionally I'm mindful of my privilege and my responsibilities because I'm human. But it is a lifelong practice and a lifelong responsibility and a lifelong privilege to avail myself of what I've been given.
And so...
It is a bit awkward, isn't it?
It is awkward, yeah. Let's just hold the mics. We're amongst friends. You won't mind if it's a bit clunky as I'm bashing my head against the microphone. And so with that, so much of your writing is clearly about tackling social issues. So much reflection of your history, of your family's experience, of the connection here in community. What then do you then see as the purpose of your writing?
Well, I go back and forth on this. My youngest child is quite precocious and has suggested repeatedly that I write rural crime because he's worked out that that's where the money is. And I briefly tried contemporary romance and was terrible at it because I'm Sri Lankan and we don't talk about those things. The purpose of writing for me is, completely honestly, and there are many artists in the room, it is initially a selfish pursuit because there is enormous joy for me in sitting down to play with words. I feel deeply connected to myself, and it is both a sort of hedonistic experience, but also one that feels where I feel progressed on my spiritual path because I feel connected to myself in the way that our religion teaches us we must strive for connection with ourselves. It also, writing enables me to create connection with other people. And so I can feel a sense of being in a community and creating community through writing, through storytelling, through reading the work of other people, and through creating work that is read by other people. I explore the issues that I explore because they matter to me. My first 5 novels were very much motivated by rage, and apologies to those of you that have seen me speak before. You know that I'm an angry person, and it comes from there. I want to know why. Why was it considered acceptable for our people, for our children, for any people, for any children, to be the victims of genocide? Why was that in any world considered appropriate? Why did the systems of justice fail our people? Why do they continue to fail people? And so I want to write about it and to use storytelling in a way that hopefully makes it real for people, and I hope that some of those people are people in power. I do think all of us have power. We all have agency over our own choices, who we vote for, where we put our money, whether we decide to put that plastic bag in the right recycling bin or not. We have choices, micro choices every single day. And I through writing, I want to explore some of those issues that enrage me, and I want to reveal these injustices that are so easily hidden.
Shankari, your books often explore the theme of family.
They do enjoy the theme of family.
They do enjoy it. They also explore it. And in particular, what it means in the context of settling into a new country. You reference things like passing down recipes or oral histories to maintain cultural traditions. This, for me, is fascinating and also important because a lot of RAC's work is that we see Australian policies and laws have a very restrictive definition of what family is. The nuclear family isn't the norm everywhere. Indeed, my own family is not a cookie cutter as the stereotype would allow. But this becomes a real issue here when the refugees we are working with seek visas for their family members to reunite with them here in Australia, and when their lives don't fit the mould. So besides your writing helping us with our submissions in making partner visas about what families look like, can you tell us about your thinking when you write about family dynamics in your books?
Yeah, absolutely. I do enjoy writing about family because, I was raised obviously by my parents, but also by my grandparents, and I think many families will be the same. I was raised by my grandparents, my aunties and uncles, any Sri Lankan elderly person. In fact, even if I meet an East Asian Australian, and they're elderly, I'm likely to just call them auntie or uncle, because it's coded into you a certain level of respect, of connection, of community. But I was raised by many people, not two. And we have names, for example. So I have a Periapa, which means my older father. And I remember thinking as a child, I was a very anxious child, prone to, catastrophizing, and then I worked through those issues by writing an apocalypse. But when I was a child, I used to worry because my father would come back from work very late. And I would think, gosh, what's going to happen to us if something happens to him? And then I would think, don't worry, Perima and Periapa, my older father and mother, will look after us. And I would then think, how do I walk to Sydney from Canberra? But anyway, we digress. So concepts of family, and I do think it is extraordinary that we live on this land, which is the home to the oldest continuous culture in the world, or cultures plural, the oldest continuous peoples in the world, who have the most insightful and progressive concept of family we are ever going to encounter, and we continue to not pay attention. And so, don't ask me, ask any First Nations person you meet, what does family mean? What does kinship mean? What does community mean? What are your responsibilities to the people that are this much here, that much, that much, that much, that much, and then the people you don't know, or the people who cross boundaries into your country that are now your guests, right? In Hinduism we say Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Atithi Devo Bhava. So what that means is your mother is your God, your father is your God, your teacher is your God, then your guest is your God. So what kind of concepts are we ignoring when we create these political boundaries around, who we think it is appropriate to consider within our care and not within our care, within our unit and not within our unit? And when my children were young and more compliant, my husband used to, we have an ongoing conversation about how do we identify as culturally, ethnically, racially, and he would try to teach them to say that you are Australian Tamil, and so that they would separate themselves from Sri Lanka, because the nation state of Sri Lanka is so challenging for the ethnic minority group of Tamils. And I would say, well, that's okay, but you have a lot of words, you're capable of more. I want you to remember that you are Australian Tamil, and you are trying hard to be responsible citizens in a global community. So I had 4 primary schoolers spitting that out on the way to school. I kid you not. They hate me now, but I wanted them to think of themselves as global citizens, responsible citizens in a global community, because the concept of community and village, and the concept of village is very dear to us, right? You go to any Sri Lankan wedding and we'll spend the first 15 minutes establishing which village you're from and what our village connections are to each other. So village is very important, but also notions of village have to go beyond geography and political boundaries if we are, and I don't mean to be too dramatic about it, but if we are actually as a species to connect and to continue, that idea of what do we owe to each other is not just because I know you, because you're related to me, it's because you are human, I am human, and you are in need.
I do need to say I like that you taught your kids to open with Australian first, because I think that's something that we really do need to centre, is that in being here, in being in this place, that is kind of our beginning join point. So I don't begrudge your kids for having that very long mouthful, but I'm glad that they opened with that connectivity to everyone here.
Thank you. They'll thank me later.
With that notion of, community, there is a real focus in Safe Haven about building community, your book, Safe Haven, and in particular, a community of resistance. Most people in this room will be very familiar with the Murugappan family, a Tamil family of 4, which included 2 young girls born in Australia, who were forced from their homes in Belvoir and detained for almost 4 years, including on Christmas Island, as they fought against their deportation. Thankfully, they all now hold permanent visas and have returned to the community of Belvoir. Having followed what is known collectively as the Home to Billow campaign, I felt like you really captured the spirit of community resistance so beautifully that we all witnessed at that time in the form of the Hastings community in rural New South Wales, a fictional setting, but the setting for Safe Haven. RACS recently held a series of legal outreach sessions in regional and rural Australia, which we dubbed RACS Goes Bush. And we're very familiar with the unique challenges in accessing support services and the different style of life that is rural Australia and what it can offer. And indeed, we are very, very grateful to the very many supports we at RACS receive from our rural communities and our non-city-centric groups that do support RACS, such as Rural Australians for Refugees and the Blue Mountains Refugee Support Group. So what was your inspiration for Hastings? Did you spend much time in rural Australia or with any communities of resistance before writing this book?
That's a great question, thank you. So the Hastings is a composite of communities, and a really important thing for me in the writing of Safe Haven was not just to lose myself and therefore lose the reader in the inhumanity of indefinite detention and the system that allows that and the government that allows that, successive governments, but to really elevate the communities that fight that. And I wanted us as readers to see what is possible. What does community advocacy look like? What does everyday people, such a terrible expression, I don't even know what that means. Aren't we all everyday people? I'm just a Monday person.
There was a song about it and we just held on to it.
So what do these people do when they wake up in the morning and think, this is shit, I'm going to do something about it? And so I have spent time, and I assume some of you have jobs, and I don't know if any of you have jobs where you have a soulmate at work as well as, maybe a soulmate at home. I'll give Harren that. If you have soulmates at work, I have a soulmate at work, and her name is Jilly, and she's somewhere in the audience here. If you just put up a hand somewhere, just quietly. There you are, right in the front. So Jilly and I knew each other in a past life, and we have had the privilege and joy of working together. And because of Jilly, I was able to go to Dubbo, to Burke, to many places in far west New South Wales, to Darwin, to Katherine, and to really spend quality time, a terrible expression that is too, to spend time, meaningful time, to sit in the dirt, as my friend Des Rogers would say, to sit in the dirt and have conversations with people, and more to listen than to talk, and to understand, to the extent that I could, what was going on in their lives, and not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but not just Aboriginal people, but people, all people, and to try to understand the challenges of rural Australia, and to be humbled by that, actually, and inspired by it, and to want to not set a rural crime novel in their world, but to set a novel of enormous community activism and integrity, and people having a different concept of family, like really adopting people into their communities, literally into their homes, and figuratively and physically making space for them, and understanding the wraparound services that are required, because it's not just about the paperwork, it's not just about the legal status, it is about all the things. How do you work? How do you live? How do you learn to navigate a shopping centre that's not like the one that you're used to? All the different systems. How do we create support around you so that when you work and you don't have your aunties and uncles to look after your children, there are other people to help you do that so that you can actually make a living? All the things. And communities that come together because they have no one else, but they understand what community and family is all about. And so Hastings is a reflection of all of that, and including Apollo Bay, which is a small town in Victoria, where I had the incredible good fortune to meet Ali Cork, who's now Auntie Ali to me. Auntie Ali adopted a young man from Christmas Island. She was part of a rural Australian, I always get the acronym wrong, I call it RARA in my book, but it's RAR.
Yes, Rural Australians for Refugees.
Thank you. So RA, or RARA as it's known in Safe Haven, it was a group of really angry grandmas who decided that they were going to write and send care packages and lobby governments, local, state and federal, and they were going to help people on Christmas Island. And Auntie Ali adopted Para, and he calls her mum, and eventually she was able to help him navigate the system, and he moved to Apollo Bay, brought his family over who were in detention camps in India, who he'd not seen for almost 10 years, and help him retrain, help him create a life. So, that's sort of almost what they call end-to-end care. Auntie Ali did it end-to-end for Para, and then over and over again. All of the families in Apollo Bay are like that. So I went to visit Apollo Bay and learn from Auntie Ali what kind of people are willing to do this for other people.
No ocean views in Hastings, though.
No oceans, because I'm
no
worried
spoilers.
about... No spoilers, but I'm concerned about climate change, so I very rarely set anything on the coast. I love how you think I'm joking.
She's not. You've mentioned it tonight, and I've heard you say this quite a number of times, that you do write from a place of anger and unrest that's helped you through literature investigating that injustice. And this I found particularly moving, given your legal background and your previous work as a lawyer. Indeed, you have met and worked alongside many of us, those sanctimonious human rights lawyers that your characters have so labelled us in your books.
Just for the record, it's the antagonists who label the human rights lawyers and the social justice lawyers the sanctimonious lawyers.
It's okay, depending on the room, I wear that as a badge of honour. So what is it that you found in writing, disrupting the challenge, the rage, injustice to be solved, that perhaps you did or you didn't find in your legal work?
That's a good question. So I do love being a lawyer, I do, and I do miss it. I must say there are times when, even if I'm just fighting with an insurance company. I really enjoy it. But I did find myself so deeply disillusioned in 2009 when the final genocide happened in Sri Lanka. I found it disillusioning that Sri Lanka's own laws could and would do nothing. I found it disillusioning, and that's really to be expected. But I've found it deeply, bitterly disillusioning that the framework of international laws, of international humanitarian laws, of the laws of war, that were meant to protect non-combatants, were meant to protect everyday people, just meant to protect people, failed them, and that there were no systems of power and no people in power that were willing to exercise those rights and those protections in the way that they were intended to be exercised. And then for the world to watch that and do very little about it. So I thought, well, if the law has failed, I've still got words. And there's power in words. I love words. I think of words as my friends. I can sometimes feel them. I feel them in my hands. And so I thought, well, I'm going to write. I'm going to tell a story. And let's see if anyone reads it.
Well, lots of people did, obviously. They're all in the room today, and I think so much of what you've said really resonates with the world that we are unfortunately watching on our television screens, and the communities that we're supporting now, and that message still absolutely needs to be heard loud and on repeat. It's going to be my final question now, so get ready for your questions.
Yes. No awkward silences, please.
No, don't leave me hanging, guys. The nursing home in your fiction novel Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens was plagued by racist attacks and anti-refugee and immigration rhetoric in the mid-2000s. Given the rise of similar, if not more, divisive rhetoric today, do you think that Chai Time is still relevant to today's anti-immigration rhetoric? Or do you think there's something unique about the current time and place that we're in now that requires another book?
Well, I'm still working on my current book, so I will not be doing a sequel. Yeah, it's a good question, Sarah. Like, it's a really interesting time, isn't it? It always feels like an interesting time. I'm sure every person at every more point in their life has thought, gosh, it's an interesting time, isn't it? It would be so great if it wasn't interesting.
I'd be out of a job.
Yes. Maybe I'd be out of a job too, actually. Actually, AI is probably going to put me out of a job. I feel that as a writer, so I'll answer this question from my perspective. When I look at things like the marches, plural, that have been happening around the world, for example, and I actually weirdly feel British and Australian and Sri Lankan Tamil. I have very curious sort of racial affiliations or political affiliations. And there are interesting marches happening in Britain, marches happening in Australia, and elsewhere around the world. And for myself, I want to understand better what is the sense of anger, frustration, fear, disenfranchisement, and disempowerment that people feel such that they would take to the streets in that way. And there are degrees of that, right? What is it that you feel in order to take to the streets in that way? What is it that you feel in order to hit someone? What is it that you feel in order to kill someone? And there's a spectrum of activity all along that, with many points along the way. And I want to know the complexity of the question and the answers that would come from such a conversation. And I want to have that conversation with people, not feeling like I need to do it from a safe distance or from behind the safety of the internet, but in a manner that is respectful and, God forbid, even loving. And when you ask me, is it time for a sequel, or does that book still have its time and place? Unfortunately, almost all literature still has its time and place. Like, you could read Handmaid's Tale, you could read 1984, you could read any novel in a library, and I will say of value, that I think I'll make a qualitative judgment there, and it will still have enormous value today and relevance today, and that is so unfortunate. And that is such a deep indictment of our inability to learn, which is why we all writers and artists still do have jobs. And so when I think about what I want to write next, my 6th novel, which will be out in sort of 6 months to 2 years, depending on how good my 15-year-old thinks it is, he's reviewing it at the moment, is one that comes from curiosity, but it explores extreme thinking. It explores how it is that we are so susceptible to extreme thinking. And when did we lose the ability to hold dialectical thought? When did we lose the ability to hold multiple ways of being, multiple ways of thinking? And my next novel after that is one where I would actually like to write, and the genre is called solar punk. Only the booksellers will know the genre. Rosie Ravelston right there. Please support them when you go to the Blue Mountains. 50% of their profits go to refugee organisations. Said no other bookstore ever. So thank you for the work that you do. I'd like to write in the genre of solar punk, which is where you write a hopeful and positive and possible future. I want to look at the world that we have had at various points and still have to this day. And I want to elevate and celebrate it. I want to write the world I want. I want to write the world that is possible. I want to write the world that we can build and that people like you are building. And so, in answer to your question, perhaps the novel is relevant still to this day. I don't think it's of the same calibre as those novels I've previously mentioned of value.
I would disagree.
I will. Thank you. I set you up for that. I will not be writing a sequel, but I will continue to write because there's more work to be done, there's more writing to be done, and there's more and better worlds to build.
And we are so grateful that you'll keep writing, because our world absolutely needs more Shankari Chandrans in this world and more of your pieces of art in this world. So thank you. It has been such a real privilege having this chat with you, and more than that, calling you our newest ambassador. We're so lucky to have you lend your profile and help us build support for the community that we work with, particularly those of us that seek asylum in Australia and find a safe place here. As I had said earlier, the RAC's Neighbourhood is a community of people giving monthly to ensure that refugees get the life-changing legal help they need when they need it most. The Neighbourhood shares our vision of justice and dignity for and with refugees, believing in a fairer and more compassionate Australia, in welcome and hospitality over exclusion and fear, that refugees and people seeking asylum can and do make a valuable contribution to our community. People seeking asylum can arrive with many and various needs. They may need food, they may need housing, healthcare, education, employment, and these are all tremendously important things. But the only thing that can ensure they find lasting safety in Australia is legal help. Thank you very much.